because what ends up happening here is that people, of course, want to weaponize the report in a way to look backwards, to point fingers, place blame in a way that actually doesn't keep us focused on the upcoming election.
So the backlash against Martin, it just gets worse from there. And then in May, you have the DNC finally releasing what it said was the report in its entirety. Well, you had a lot of people dunking on what they considered a mess, and people going, oh my God, what were the real lessons they were even going towards? Now, you've got the guy who wrote the autopsy, Paul Rivera, claiming that the version that the DNC released was actually missing a chapter. And you actually had the New York Times publishing it in full. It's titled What Happened in 2024, and as you might have guessed, it addresses some of the politically delicate subjects that were left out of the report. First off, you have it stating, is there a single point of failure for 2024? Saying perhaps it is a decision of the president to seek re-election instead of passing the torch. Explaining that his approval in Gallup polls had dropped below 50% after the Afghanistan pullout and never recovered. Also, Biden's own internal polling, it showed the same thing, that he was underwater nationally and in key states. Also in the 22 midterms, turnout from young voters as well as Black, Hispanic, Asian, and Native American voters, that was down. And while 2024 campaign planners knew that, according to this chapter, they could not fix the problem, and so it concludes. What Democrats now have to accept is no matter the circumstances, the party should be strong enough and capable enough to elect anyone, the proverbial ham sandwich if necessary, because Republicans have now proven they can nominate and elect a convicted felon. But the chapter, this is a key thing, also argues that what's standing between the Democratic Party that we have and the Democratic Party that we need are the established Democrats themselves. Yes, bitch. Or because you have it noting that an emerging critique of Democratic decision-making is that there are too many people who have become generationally wealthy off politics and drive too much of the decision-making within the ecosystem. And you have the chapter adding, this is deeply frustrating to many Democratic strategists, activists, and donors who want to try a different set of politics, but keep banging their heads up against a system proven to be inflexible and self-enriching. And it then goes on to say that many of the senior campaign staff, media strategists, pollsters, and consultants are financially secure and insulated from the reality most Americans lived. And so as a result, they missed important signals about why people were frustrated with Democrats who seemed not to appreciate or understand their situation. Now, I also want to note here for you that there is a pretty heated dispute about whether this chapter was really omitted from the report, or because you have the author, Rivera, claiming that back in January, he printed out the full report with this chapter included, and he gave it to Martin during a private meeting. But you have Martin actually denying that, saying, yeah, we met, and yeah, he gave me the report, but it didn't include this chapter. And he added, if I or the DNC had report materials that went after self-enriching consultants, we absolutely would have included them. But you've got Rivera telling the Times, whether that was a conscious decision on their part to bury the section for the purposes of hiding a paragraph, I don't know. That's a them question. What I can tell you is they had it, and they made a decision not to release it. And with all that, I will say that it is a bit hard to discern who's telling the truth here. Though for his part, Rivera gave the Times a Word doc of the chapter with metadata showing that it was last edited right before the meeting with Martin. And in the version of the report that was released, there is a section where the chapter would have been, but it's listed as pending. And it has an annotation saying this section was not provided by author. That's actually not out of the ordinary for this report because other sections had the same note, including the executive summary. And that then goes to another issue that not just Martin, but many party members have with the whole report. And that's that it's just not very good. And officials have said that they only changed their minds about releasing it after they realized how shoddy it was. And you had them pointing to Rivera's use of cliches, data without sources, and numbers contradicted by public data. Because then, right when the full report came out, each page included a bright red disclaimer that the DNC was not provided with the underlying sourcing, interviews, or supporting data for many of the assertions contained herein. And it's also why you have some dismissing this omitted chapter out of hand with, for example, the former Biden advisor and current DNC member John McCarthy saying, so let me get this straight. The operative behind the botched Democratic autopsy on why we lost decided that 90 days before a midterm, it is the perfect time to air it all out, and we are supposed to listen? That's political malpractice. We have elections to win. Focus on November. But at the same time, whether this autopsy thing has merit or not, there is growing frustration with Ken Martin's leadership in general.